Hello everyone, Dr. Rolani here. Today's video is going to be a little bit on the funner side. I'm going to show you how we design hairlines the day of your procedure. Now, I know the day of procedure things are going to move fast. That's why in this video, hopefully you can understand like what's going through our head as we're moving through the process and asking you the questions and how we're going to design this thing. So there is both a scientific and artistic way to design hairlines. You'll see that both come into play when we do mine. Sometimes you rely purely on science, sometimes purely on artism. So let's start with the sideburns and then kind of build towards the middle. The first landmark I'm going to point out is something called the tragus on your ear. It's this little bump. I'm going to put a little landmark there. The second landmark I'm going to point out is the bone on the side of my eye socket. I'm going to point it out, draw a little dot there. So halfway between these 2 points is actually the front part of the sideburn. So for reestablishing your sideburn thickness, this is exactly how we're going to do it. The halfway between this point and that point is your sideburn. So that's measurement number 1. Measurement number 2, we're actually going to find the upper part of your eye bone. And we're going to draw a line straight across into your sideburn. Now what is that? That is the upper extent of the vertical portion of your sideburn. So we know your sideburn is right there. And we know that it's going to stop at its uppermost point at that area. All right, so the next point is actually finding the peak of your temporal, we call your temporal peak, and we're going to do that with 2 landmarks. Number 1, we already had before, is the side of your eye bone. I'm going to draw a line straight up there, and that's going to tell me the front extent of this temporal peak. How to determine the next crossing point, I actually have to use one of my muscles that's involved in me biting. So I'm going to act like I'm biting. I'm going to feel this muscle on the side of my face here. And it's called the temporalis muscle. And actually there's a little ridge of the bone that muscle is. I'm just going to draw it out for us here. And you can see that it just happens to follow the shape of the upper part of the temporal peak. It's going to cross this line, telling us where that point is. And we're going to be able to draw the bottom half of the temporal peak by connecting the dot. And that is a scientifically drawn sideburn. Now, as we age, that sideburn tends to be blunted and tends to move backwards. And we may decide to reconstruct that as we move forward, as we do your procedure. Next, I want to actually move to the center part of my face. Your hairline is actually determined, its position is determined in proportion to your face. And the proportions are called the golden thirds. The bottom one third of your face should be the same length as the middle 1/3 of your face, such as the upper 1/3 of your face. Now, those distances are from the bottom of the nose to the chin. So that distance for me is bottom of the nose 1/3 to the chin. The next 1/3 is the bottom of the nose to the eyebrow, which you can see my middle third is proportion to the bottom third. Now the top third, going from my eyebrow to my hairline, you can see is well off from proportion. However, until I point that out to you, you probably did not notice that my hairline is actually about 2.5 to 3 centimeters too low. I use my fingers to cover this up. You can see that if I had a hairline that started above my fingers, it would look perfectly normal and probably. I remove my fingers, and almost you can tell that my hairline is actually too low. So that is now moving away from the scientific and we're seeing more of the arts. Like, yes, I was born with a hairline that's too low, and I could have probably actually benefited from having a hairline that's higher to make my face more proportional, but until I point out, you weren't able to tell. So what does that mean? Well, that means during the transplant, we actually have to account for this. We cannot just avoid it. That hair will likely always be there. It may recede, but we can't just exclude it from a hairline drawing itself. So we know that I'm actually going to have to use my real hairline, and we're going to have to break away from the scientific drawing for a short period of time. And we're going to figure out what to do with the rest of it. Moving on to what we call the temporal recessions now. These are areas that people usually always want filled up during their procedure. So looking at the front hairline, you can see my temporal peak on this side is right about there. and my temporal peak on this side is over there. And you can see that those 2 points are very uneven. That if I draw this line where my hairline should be, that on my left side, it's about 1 centimeter behind that line. And on my right side, it's about 3 centimeters behind. But unless I pointed it out to you, you would have probably thought that my hairline looks totally natural, when in fact it's very asymmetric. And that's one of the key things. Symmetry can trip your eyes to make things seem like they're not natural. So when we do your procedure, we actually aim for some asymmetry. And when we see this and we say we're going to advance this side 1 centimeter, do we advance this side 1 centimeter or 3? We'll probably just maybe do 1.5 to 2, but we're not going to try to make them totally symmetric. That's something that always might trip people up the day of when we design their hairline versus after, and it's kind of a trust factor to know that that is totally normal. So let's go back to where we were. We have to use my hairline in the front here. And we know that we're going to probably move the distance temporal recession point probably forward 1 centimeter, and this one maybe forward 1.5 centimeters, but definitely not 3.5 centimeters. When I draw this hairline, the one thing I don't want to make a mistake of is making it too circular. That makes it a little feminine. So I'm actually going to draw this, and I come pretty sharply to the point where we reach the upper part of the temporal peak. And you can see that is just a small amount of filling. We'll have a substantial improvement on my face. On this side, we're still going for a little asymmetry. You can see I'm going to fill in a lot more area, but definitely still asymmetric, where this line is approximately 1 centimeter more forward than that. This is also a point where people may not realize up front. This small amount of advancement is actually pretty substantial. It may not seem a lot like in the day of surgery, but imagine if I had hair completely here, that'd be a pretty youthful hairline again. Now, if I did not have this part of my hair here, I actually don't look like I have any recession at all, and I may not even need a transplant. But because I was born with this kind of fur lock of hair, these temporal recession peaks seem a little bit too excessive. And because of that, we're not going to go too crazy when we correct them. So I know I'm just one case example, but these are the things that go through our mind as we're designing your hairline in the morning. And we do it pretty quick because of our experience, but this is, you can see there's a lot that goes into it. The measurements, knowing proportions to kind of have an experience, and then also making sure that we don't go too perfect to make it look unnatural. Hopefully this video helps you out in how we design hairlines. If you have any questions in the morning of your surgery, obviously stop us to ask those questions.